Welcome back. I hope everybody's had a good week, a great week. I'm going to talk some more about frankincense. Frankincense is a big subject. There's a lot to say and many uses of frankincense. I'm going to talk about a specific species of frankincense that we are featuring over at Floracopeia right now. It's called Boswellia rivae. And Boswellia is the genus name for all the frankincense trees. And Rivae is a unique species. It's fairly commonly found. It's not like a really unusual type of frankincense on the market, although there are, of course, many variations in the qualities that are available. So here's what the resin looks like. It's kind of a dark purple. I don't know if that's going to come across or not, but it's kind of like a purple blue kind of resin. It looks more brown in the camera, but actually it's kind of purplish. So this gives a beautiful oil, and this is the oil here that we are featuring. And I thought that what I would do today is tell you the 6 major uses of frankincense oil. Now, I've touched on this before, and it's worth repeating. It's worth summing everything up, just to give you a real simple system as a way of remembering everything. So, this is a unique fragrance. Each of the Boswellia species has a distinct aroma. And even the same species can have distinct aromas depending on where it came from, because the same species can grow in different ecosystems. So there are different ecotypes. Not only are there different species, there's different varieties, and then there's different ecotypes. So there's quite a lot of variation in frankincense. So this one, I'll just give you a brief introduction to the olfactory characteristics here. So, how's that? Can you smell it? It's a very deep, rich. It's definitely got the characteristic terpenic top notes. But once those dry out, what we're left with is something that's a lot more earthy and resinous, but also quite sweet, actually. So it's curious because you can sometimes see the correlation between the color of the resin and the fragrance of the oil. Sometimes the lighter resins actually they actually smell lighter. So this is a dark purple resin. Again, I'll just show it for those who just joined. And the oil is characteristic of all the frankincenses. A lot of pinene type of fragrance. Sort of coniferous notes at the top, but it's also got sort of a elegant, deeper bass note in it. That's very nice to know about. So what are we going to do with the frankincense oil then? Well, I'll sum up the 6 major uses for you, for those of you who are interested in aromatherapy applications of frankincense oil. And I will say that these 6 major these 6 major uses actually cross over through all the species. No matter what species of frankincense oil you have, you can use it for these particular purposes. Now, different species do have different aromatic profiles, which means that they have different chemistries, which means that they do have some differences in their therapeutic functions. And we can study that. We can really go into quite a lot of science, chemistry, and therapeutics and so forth, and we can break it down. The different frankincenses are better for this and better for that. But I'll give you the 6 major categories of therapeutic function right now. Number 1, respiratory purposes. That includes colds and flus, upper respiratory infections, all kinds of cough and congestion and so forth. So, number 1, respiratory. Number 2, antimicrobial powers. And of course, these go together. I'm going to give you the first overview of the 6 functions, and then I'm going to go back and I'm going to give you some formulas and some specific ways of using them. So, respiratory, number 1, Second is antimicrobial. And of course, those cross over. And then third is going to be the spiritual functions. And so the spiritual functions are the mental and emotional. The impact of fragrance on our moods through the limbic system. And that, of course, has to do with balancing our mental states and emotional fluctuations and antidepressant, anti-anxiety purposes and so forth. So that's a third. Fourth is going to be benefits to the skin, and there are significant, multiple benefits of frankincense, oil and resin preparations for skin conditions. Number 5 is going to be for circulatory purposes, enhancing circulation, and number 6 is going to be anti-inflammatory. And so, of course, many of these cross back and forth. Circulatory and anti-inflammatory, support each other very nicely therapeutically, and skin and anti-inflammatory, skin and antimicrobial. So let's go back now, and I'll explore each of these a little bit more and give you a few recipes, a few ideas of how you can blend frankincense oil effectively in some simple home pharmacy level aromatherapy application. So respiratory, the main uses of essential oils for respiratory purposes, you already know. We've been touching on it over and over again. It's going to be a couple drops on the palms, direct inhalation, a couple drops on a pot of hot water, cover the head with a towel and breathe it. Keep the steam out of your eyes, don't burn your sinuses. These basic safety considerations. And then also we can develop aromatherapy a little bit further, and we can put a few drops in salve and ointment for a chest rub, things like that. So frankincense, use that as a starting point then for a respiratory blend. Now, normally I start with the conifer oils, the eucalypti and the conifers, as the most important starting oils for respiratory conditions. But you can also start from frankincense, and they combine perfectly. So frankincense essential oil is extremely versatile when it comes to blending. You can blend frankincense essential oil with virtually anything. And another beautiful thing about it is that it's quite safe. It is very low dermotoxic potential. Now, of course, don't drink essential oils. Don't take them undiluted internally. And if you don't know why, go to the adverse reaction databases. And that'll scare you that you won't drink it. And so this is a really safe oil. All right, it's very easy to use it in dilutions and for skin applications and for respiratory purposes, and not worry about some of the toxic compounds that are found in some of the essential oils. So respiratory use of frankincense, we start with the frankincense oil in the diffuser or in the steam or in the compress. And that's going to treat colds and flus and congestion and cough and all kinds of things like that. And you can blend it with the conifer oils for that particular purpose, or the eucalypti oils for that purpose. But it also blends really nicely with the flower oils. And the flower oils are also highly antimicrobial. And they're relaxing, and they're cooling, and anti-inflammatory for the respiratory system as well. So frankincense and the conifers, the respiratory oils, frankincense and the flowers, those go together really nice. And so that's a good starting point. But you can move in more of the direction of the sacred scents also, frankincense and sandalwood, frankincense and vetiver. It's an extremely versatile oil. So let's start with that for the respiratory purposes. And then we can also say that frankincense is strongly antimicrobial, and it's been used for that purpose forever. People think of, mummifications of, the Egyptian pharaohs, and what is mummification? It's basically anti-putrefaction, and that means antimicrobial. So frankincense resin has a preservative effect that is based on fighting microbes, and it will last forever. That's another nice thing about frankincense essential oils, that it has an extremely long shelf life, decades and decades, if not centuries. Now, over time, of course, the chemistry in essential oils will degrade a little bit, some faster than others, And that's why it's always good to keep them out of sunlight. And if you're not using them, it's good to keep them refrigerated. That'll slow down the process. But the thing is that the resin itself, this will look exactly like this and smell exactly like this, 10,000 years from now. So it's something that has preservative powers because of its antimicrobial powers. So what we can do with that then is think in terms of, well, where are we directing these antimicrobial powers? If it's to the lungs, then we can add the other oils that I mentioned to enhance that antimicrobial power. Or we can think of other kinds of uses. And one of the first things that comes to mind is the synergy between frankincense and myrrh. And it's actually been researched that when frankincense and myrrh are used together, either as resins in powder form or in essential oil form, that they actually enhance each other's antimicrobial powers quite a lot. That's because you get a broader spectrum of antimicrobial compounds that are targeting the microbes. So that's something to think about. And of course, these synergies have been known a very, very long time. You see that synergy of frankincense and myrrh in a lot of preparations in Chinese medicine for a lot of things. So that's one way to increase the antimicrobial powers. And again, as I said, the flower oils increase the antimicrobial powers. But if you really want to get serious, then you think about things like tea tree, or Ravensar, or Nyauli, or oregano, or any of the spice oils, things like that. All the spice oils, they're difficult to work with because they can really irritate the sinuses if they're too strong in the diffuser. And you should definitely not take them internally. And you should definitely not put them undiluted on the skin because they're caustic. But in a diffuser, something like Tulsi, which smells like oregano, it smells like clove, it has a lot of eugenol in it. Tulsi oil, a little bit of Tulsi, say like one part of Tulsi and 4 parts of frankincense. Something like that has very strong antimicrobial powers for atmospheric purification. And this, of course, takes us back to some of the information I mentioned previously about how fumigation, using frankincense on a burner to fumigate the home, transform it into a temple, purify the atmosphere. This has been scientifically documented. And studies have found that burning frankincense, the smoke of fumigating frankincense in the home, actually they did the studies in churches, and they found that over 90% of the airborne pathogens were destroyed in the smoke. You see, so this is an ancient way of using frankincense for antimicrobial powers. All right, so that's the respiratory and that's the antimicrobial. And then, of course, the next major category we come to is the effects on consciousness. And that's where we have the integration of frankincense along with other, what we could call the sacred scents, things that have been used forever for spiritual endeavors. And that can be anywhere. It can be in the home, in our meditation room, or just in the living room. Anytime we want to change, the atmosphere of the home into something a little bit more peaceful and remind us of the smell of frankincense that we may have encountered in temples and mosques and pagodas and shrines in our past. So the frankincense aroma has a very long history of being understood, recognized, and utilized actually for treating the mind and treating the emotions. And if we look at this in scientific terms, modern psychological terms, what we're talking about here is the suffering of the mind and the emotions that happens across a spectrum from depression to anxiety. And this entire spectrum pretty much sums up everything we suffer from. And if we go to the really extreme end of anxiety, then we have manias and panic attacks and things like that. And if we go to the really extreme end of depression, then we have extreme withdrawal and serious clinical depressive states. But everything in between pretty much sums up everything we suffer from. And we can also describe this in Chinese medical terms, and we can say that one end of the spectrum is very yang, and one end is very yin. And so the yang end of the spectrum, the anxiety and panic and the mania side of it, is extremely active, fiery, hot, restless, agitated, angry, all these kind of things. While the yin side of it is more dark and withdrawn and antisocial and lack of motivation. We all have experienced some degree or high degrees of these things, and it's easy to understand. Now, the reason that I'm telling you about this spectrum is because as humans, we all experience this at various times, and what we see is that this is the motivating factor. This spectrum of mental, emotional suffering is the reason that people turn to spiritual practices. And spiritual practices are what heal that ultimately. Now, there are lots of ways that we can use herbal medicine to relax the nervous system, calm down the anxiety side of it, make things less agitated, or to uplift us more. But it depends on the severity of the situation and how developed it is and what the causes are and so forth. And many times we have to integrate many kinds of natural treatments together. But always there is the need to have some kind of practices that are really retraining our mind directly. Because this entire spectrum, there is a physiological basis, there is a neurochemical basis, there is a basis in our past history of circumstances and trauma and all of these kind of things. There's no doubt about it. But there's also a wide spectrum of how people respond to things, okay? And ultimately, we would like to be able to transcend all of it. We would like to be able to put everything into such a broad spiritual context that we could really metabolize our mental and emotional suffering and not get stagnant in it, okay? And so that's a very big part of the spiritual path, is learning how to digest the past, learning how to assimilate, transform, metabolize, burn up, purify things that have happened to us that have shaped our responses to the world. And this is where the sacred scents can be a very good support, because if we are using frankincense in the diffuser, it's going to have a physiological effect, neurological effect, that will help us to calm down and become more relaxed. But it also is uplifting. And that's a very interesting aspect of using things like frankincense and Palo Santo and sandalwood and agar wood, these things that have always had a long history of spiritual applications. They actually have this dual function of calming but uplifting at the same time. And that's really important, because the two are so mixed. Anxiety and depression are often so mixed that we would like to simultaneously calm the nervous system and lift up our heart. I think that's a good way to put it, lift up our spirit. So we can use frankincense in the diffuser along with those other sacred scents. They work really nicely. Or anything that has a calming and uplifting kind of effect simultaneously. And then we go back to the flowers. So frankincense and lavender, really nice, okay? Frankincense and Palo Santo, really nice, okay? These kind of things help us to calm down and feel better mentally and emotionally. And if we combine that with meditation practice over and over and over and over again, then what happens is we can retrain our nervous system so that as soon as we sit down to meditate, we can go into a much deeper state of meditation. That happens naturally if you meditate in short segments several times a day. Then you'll get into the neurological habit. Your brain will remember, oh, now it's time for meditation. And so it's going to shift gears. But the olfactory link to this is very important to consider, because fragrance is a mnemonic device for neurological memories, you see, for memories in general. But we can use the fragrance of frankincense or any of these types of sacred scents, or anything relaxing, really, along with our meditation session over and over and over again, And then what starts to happen is as soon as we smell that fragrance, our brain remembers, oh, now it's time to be relaxed, or now it's time to feel better emotionally. So that's a little bit about the spiritual side, and it's the psychological and the meditative side of it as well. And that, of course, has a big impact on our immune system. And so that crosses over again back to respiratory immunity. So what else? Then we have skin. Okay, and frankincense has always been used in skin preparations. And traditionally, of course, it was made into oils. The resin was infused into oils, carrier oils, and used for ointments and salves and unguents and so forth. And it has incredible skin healing effects. And I have touched on this in the past. I'll just mention again, excellent combination of frankincense with helichrysum. Very, very good for soft tissue injuries, bruising, resolving scar tissues, skin cell regenerative, skin protective overall. All right, so frankincense in various forms can be added to cosmetic products, to skincare products. You can have a base salve, a base ointment, a base lotion, something like that. A couple drops of frankincense oil in that is going to enhance its skin protective, regenerative purposes. That is closely related to anti-inflammatory powers also. Then we have the anti-inflammatory powers. I'll just jump right into that. Frankincense is well known as having anti-inflammatory powers, and that could start in the respiratory system. If you're using it in the diffuser for colds and flus, it will help to cool the irritation in the mucous membranes. But it also is the basis of why frankincense is used in a lot of liniments in classical Chinese medicine, especially. Okay, and why a close relative of myrrh is used in Ayurvedic medicine so much, which is guggulu. All right, so guggulu is a myrrh. Frankincense and myrrh together enhance each other's powers for anti-inflammatory purposes. Guggulu is taken internally. It has guggulsterones for lowering your cholesterol, okay? But it's also found along with what is now called boswellia, all right? And that's the frankincense. So I know I'm throwing a lot of information out there. Let me clarify this. The boswellia products, which you can find on the shelf at the health food store, they're frequently just called boswellia. Well, that's the genus name of frankincense. So what boswellia is, as a supplement, all right, it's actually a family of compounds called boswellic acids. Now, boswellic acids do not transfer into essential oils. There's been a lot of discussion and controversy about this. They have to be extracted in different kinds of ways. And they can be extracted in tincture form from the resin, for example. And we're going to be offering this coming soon. So the boswellic acids are well recognized now as being the active principles that have a significant anti-inflammatory power. If taken internally for things like musculoskeletal pain, general anti-inflammatory purposes, but specifically for arthritic purposes and supportive in autoimmune conditions also. Now, in Ayurveda, we have guggulu, and so I'll circle back around to that. And guggulu is a type of myrrh, and frankincense and myrrh are frequently combined. All right, so frankincense itself is not used so much as this guggulu, Commiphora mucul, or Commiphora whitei, okay, or witty. That is a major medicine. But I'm just mentioning this because if we are looking at anti-inflammatory compounds, these two things are going to always come up right away from the tree medicines, okay? You're going to always see boswellia, boswellic acids, and you're always going to see guggulu. And the anti-inflammatory powers of what are basically called the guggulu medicines. There's 7 or 8 major guggul medicines that are made from this resin. Now, I'm mentioning this because all of these things fit together, and if you need significant anti-inflammatory powers, you should know which formula of gugul to take internally, and you should also know about the boswellic acids, and you should also know that even though the essential oil doesn't have boswellic acid in it, it still has significant anti-inflammatory powers, and you can add that into carrier oils. You can take an oil, an herbal oil. We have several in the Western herbal tradition, like St. John's wort and arnica and calendula and things like that. And then there are many, many herbal oils in Ayurveda. And you can take an herbal oil and you can add frankincense to it and apply that to your stiff and sore muscles, inflamed muscles and joints. And it can be very, very helpful, especially if you are combining taking the gugul formulas and the boswellic acids internally. Okay, then the last thing that I will mention here briefly, and then I'll see if there's any questions that anybody's asking. The last major purpose, number 6, is enhanced circulation. Okay, so in Chinese medicine, the way we see this is that, again, frankincense and myrrh are combined. And in Chinese medicine, they were referred to as the two sisters, okay? Mu Yao and Yu Xiang, okay? Myrrh and frankincense, Mu Yao and Yu Xiang. And again, it's based on a recognized synergy. And these were generally put into plasters, liniments, ointments, and plasters. And so the pharmacists would make an herbal paste with the frankincense and myrrh resin in it and other types of herbs according to the recipe. And then they would put this paste on a cloth, and then that goes on to the area typically of an injury. Okay, and this is actually developed as a branch of medicine. Reputedly came from the Shaolin Monastery, where the monks were training in kung fu and getting injured. But it's a branch of medicine called Theta medicine, hit medicine. So anytime there's injuries, soft tissue injuries, vitalizing the blood to resolve bruising is very important. But vitalizing the blood for other kinds of blood stagnation issues is also a major part of Chinese herbal medicine. And so we see formulas that actually have these two resins in them that are also taken internally, you see, for moving blood stasis kinds of conditions. All right, so with that, I'll just mention that I'm starting the new formulas course over at the Shift Network, and you can check that out. That starts next week. It's going to be 7 weeks of talking about all kinds of herbal formulas in Chinese tradition and the Ayurvedic tradition and the Western tradition, and how to make things in our own kitchens. So a lot of information as usual. And let's see if there's anything else I should mention here in my little marketing moment. I'll remind you that we have the Frankincense Rivae. Again, here's the oil. Again, here's the resin. And beautiful oil, lots of things that you can do with it now that you know what to do. And let me just check and see if any questions have come in. It doesn't look like there's any questions that have come in. And so, oh yes, there is a question. Something I forgot to mention. We are doing a giveaway. We have 5 free tickets, five free passes to the Formulas course. And you can take a look at our most recent post, and that will give you all the instructions of how you can join that Formulas course. So I believe that's everything. And I hope that you enjoyed it. I hope you found it helpful. And we have more things next week and the week after and the week after. So have a wonderful week. Enjoy the frankincense oil and enjoy all the oils safely. Use them wisely. And see you in a week.